alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. This is Noor AlHumaidi, an architect in the Ministry of Municipality. First, I would like to thank you all for coming and attending as we are approaching the end of this outstanding conference. Before starting with today's program, let us watch a recap on what happened yesterday. And for today's program, there will be two parallel sessions, the closing plenary and finally the Congress Gala dinner. And now, let me introduce to you the member of the board and the executive committee of ISOCARP. She will share a reflection on the COP26 and on women in planning. Please welcome Mrs. Elisabeth Belpaire, an engineer, architect, and an urban and spatial planner.
Dear delegates, colleagues, and friends, I invite you to close your eyes for a minute. Remember the last days, a wonderful time in which we could meet each other again in person, and also a needed time to discuss, question existing planning paradigms, and exchange ideas and lessons to unlock planning. Now picture the big issues for which we need transformative change this decade. Can I change the... Okay. Climate and biodiversity crisis and the still ongoing COVID crisis. Traditional concepts, tools, methods are inadequate. We need the out-of-the-box thinking, innovative ideas and strategies for our young and future generations, for the planet, for all life, and it is urgent. Planning and planners have a transformative and critical role to play. The Virtual World Planning Congress opened with a panel debate on climate crisis. To further unlock minds, to put planning and cities higher on the agenda, an ISOCARP delegation went to the COP26 in Glasgow, led by ISOCARP member Martina Guevara. So what are the messages so far? Cities play a critical role in our multiple crises. They are leading sources of greenhouse gas emissions, but also the places where different aspects of climate crisis intersect and where strong responses are needed for a fair and just transition. Balance between human and natural systems should be the focus of urban development and replace the mindset of planning cities for economic and spatial growth as a primary goal. Livable cities include integration of health, mobility, built and natural environment, and employment. These are interrelated and paramount goals. Comprehensive change in urban systems and lifestyles is necessary and can anticipate innovation and technology, which in themselves can only offer a partial solution, especially when adopted in isolation. Priorities are different in different parts of the world. Reducing urban metabolism and decarbonizing the built environment are the priority in global north, while planning for climate adaptation amidst rapid urbanization is relevant in many of the global south. Planning strategies are therefore different in emphasis, but the solution is in the combination of the two. Planning must have a global aspiration with locally based, contextual, equitable and collaborative solutions. Strategic spatial planning holds the key to making other strategies effective. from rural balance to food and transport innovation. Planning is also key to prepare cities to climate shocks and disasters that seem now inevitable. And last, investment in planning, research, planning education and political acumen of planners are essential across the globe. The lack of planning skills in less developed countries must be rapidly remedied. Planners must rise to take a bigger role and change the mindsets and practice to address this current challenge. Now, close your eyes again and think about this. Next slide, please. You are a black South African young woman, aspiring to urban planning, academic, and you discover that skin color today still matters, and that it takes fighting the system every day just to be able to get a PhD in your own country, to then teach to the next generation. You are a Qatari woman, urban planner, and share your experience about the opportunities you have been given and the investment of the government in your education and career. Reflecting on how cities would look like if they are designed by women planners, some women said, very different, followed by constructive reflections and exchange of experience on planning concepts and profession. For example, reflections on walkability led to consideration on impact of bodies and on how, for instance, pregnant women walk at slower pace, shorter distances, and need more frequent stops and benches in order to equally enjoy the public space. And how semi-public space or the in-between spaces in our urban fabric are important for socializing and well-being. The stories about education are important because they can unlock barriers. As mentioned on our website, the World Planning Congress is a venue for creating of new planning concepts and start reshaping the planning profession, charting the future for planning profession. We thus also need to unlock the barriers to enable access to this planning, education and profession. The stories on women in cities are not only necessary for more equitable and diverse, inclusive cities. The citizens in the city are not the average citizen. And women and gender is the perfect cross-cutting approach across culture, age, ethnicity, race, religion, geographical context, as one of the participants said. So these are only a few of the many exchanges and constructive reflections we had in the 2 Women in Planning events that were organized by and for women very early in the morning, with more than 30 women planners ready at 7:30, yes, before the plenary events, and we were in time. There was a walk and talk and a shared journey and coffee events. The events, they were bringing together professional women in planning and placemaking from across the world, from different ages and diverse fields, including practitioners, academics, public servants, government officials, young planning professionals and students. The informal events acted as a source of inspiration, exchange, learning, and I know we can leverage this internationally. The World Planning Congress in Doha offered a unique opportunity to meet in person, build support and network friendships. It's an important building block. It's important to offer this safe space and for empowering women globally, but also to support the new urban agenda and the SDGs. Unlocking planning for new times, better places and stronger communities also means empowering women globally. I'm very proud as these events are a first. It's the first ever time in the history of ISOCARP since 1965 that Women in Planning is taking place at the World Planning Congress in person. A highlight of the conference, as one of the participants said. I'm very thankful also to the Ministry of Municipality and Environment for their cooperation and warm support for the event. So what will happen? We discussed some short-term and long-term actions and long-term ambition. But speaking here on behalf of all the voices that were present, we can for certain say that this network just started and will grow, and that the Women in Planning event will become a fixed event at ISOCARP World Planning Congresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Elisabeth. And now we will have the reflection and the summary of the location-based workshops that happened on Tuesday. First, let me introduce to you Dalal Khalid Al-Bakir, a graduate from Kuwait University, bachelor's in architectural engineering. She is architectural engineer in the Ministry of Municipality, interested in design of architecture and urban planning. She will give a brief about the workshop that was held under the first track, which is for inclusiveness and empowerment in the educational city. Please welcome Dalal.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good morning, everyone. As Noor said, I'll talk briefly today about the Educational City Workshop. The Education City, as per Qatar National Master Plan, is one of the 3 metropolitan centers in Qatar, Al-Rayyan North Metropolitan Center. It is a development catalyzed in Al-Rayyan municipality. It is planned as a self-sufficient mega project. It is not only an educational hub, but also acts as a cultural sport community hub. The master plan has been developed considering the accessibility and connectivity, as it is fully connected with the public transportation. It was super clear during our site visit that the Education City is developed in a proper way, as planned and phased consistently with its objectives. The site visit of the Education City was really impressive. All the right steps were taken with a conscious and generally environmentally sustainable approach. But not all the solutions are yet well used. And according to the workshop question was about the need for a transition to an integrated mobility. How can behavioral change be initiated to move beyond the individual car? Defining tactical urbanism solutions that supports the transition from car-centric to a multimodal transport. So we all agreed on that the objectives were clear and made sense. Car-free, or at least less individual traffic. Transition to electric shared public mobility. Qatar Foundation is taking good steps, but the project is too large and vast. This transition is hard and will take time. Community culture change needs to happen in a process. Behavioral change shall happen first, not by prohibiting, but by providing better, convincing alternatives. Throughout the workshop, we had 3 teams. Team A recommended an incremental approach, a lot of small actions, policies working together, public transportation, shading the public spaces, actions like a car-free day supported by mid-term policy change. Team B saw the opportunity of a campus of nature and sharing that vastly reduces sealed surfaces and replaces it with a canopy of intelligent landscape, plus a move towards shared spaces for pedestrian, non-motorized transport and public transport, an intelligent mobility network. Team C rethink the future of QF as a mosaic of city and campus, with punctual densification key locations to provide full urban service and walkability throughout a walkable city and a campus. The recommendations of the workshop were as following. Decrease or eliminate all car parking except for emergency and drop-off. Increase the park and ride areas. Complete bike lane and trail network and connect it with the national network. Developing more connected public spaces with more shaded areas and urban furniture. Revisiting relevant policies and policies change. Full implementation of the public transport network, promoting culture change, for example, starting with initiatives such as private car-free day. Densify and urbanize selected spots of Qatar Foundation. As a conclusion, Qatar Foundation makes a very big bet. There is enormous ambitions and a lot of quality, yet the site is still underuses. It is a long-term investment, evidently not about financial gains. Now, a process of communication is due to activate the spaces and transform their usage. At the end, I'd like to thank Dr. Hiba and Thomas, Mr. Thomas, for their great efforts throughout the workshop. It was a pleasure working with you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalal. And now let me introduce to you Muna Nuruddin, Senior Urban Planning and Design Specialist, working in the Ministry of Municipality. She will highlight the major remarks from the workshop and discussion held for Track 2, which is for well-being and health. Please welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to make a brief summary for what happened in the Track 2. For the Track 2 workshop, the main notion was revolving around creating healthy, active, and livable cities. And that's why we have chosen Aspire Zone as the place for us, for the workshop to occur, because Aspire Zone for us is one of the main sports hub in the country, and it's actually playing multiple layers of activating the city and hosting international events. So we have a role of international events, hosting many international events, whether it's football, different Olympic competitions and tournaments, as well as its role for the community itself to provide sports facilities for everybody, regardless of the level of athletic for such users. And also providing a wide variety of recreational facilities that the communities themselves can enjoy it. So the role that Aspire is playing is quite significant to activate and make Qatar a livable place. And that's why we conduct the workshop by starting a site visit to explore the different destinations in Aspire. We started by Aspire Dome, which has, again, a wide variety of sports facilities, indoor sports facilities that really considering the climate issues that we have here in Qatar. Aspire Academy or Aspire Dome is not only for providing sports facility, but it has also an academic part. There is an academy over there that's trying to create the balance between the academic field and also to create potentiality for its students by, again, building their capacity when it comes to sports facilities. And next, we have visited the Torch. It is the highest building here in Qatar. So all the participants got the opportunity to have a panoramic view for the whole city. It was quite amazing. We ended up our site visit by visiting Khalifa Stadium. It is one of the stadiums that will host the World Cup 2022, and it's also the oldest stadium here in Qatar. So again, it was quite amazing experience for the participants to see different attractions of sports facilities here. And then we start our workshop by us as a planning body to explain the holistic strategic development framework for creating active and livable cities and the provision for the sports facilities across the whole country. And then Aspire team explain the whole phases for Aspire itself. We have two phases for Aspire. One is mainly sports oriented, and the other one about creating more of sports city. So it's a mixed use, recreational, and the notion mainly, again, revolving around having a park where the city will be inside the park. So it will be quite active once it's finalized. Phase 2, it will be quite really more even active and attractive attraction for Qatar. And then we started to make the brainstorming session. And before, we also gave an opportunity for many research papers in the workshop. We have heard from many international experiences, especially when it comes to the legacy plan, like the Olympic Village in London and how they converted into more, again, active recreational hub for the country. We have heard some examples from Italy, and so on and so forth. So it was quite, again, enriching experience to share the knowledge and to have a brainstorming session. For the brainstorming session, we have been focusing on three main questions or three main groups. We divided ourselves into three main groups. So the first one, tackling the holistic approach, again, for creating livable and active cities. We get to know the notion between mixing the movements, accessibility, people, and different attractions holistically across the country, and how can we do it as a policymakers, as placemakers, and again, as urban planners and urban designers across all fields. And then we have another workshop session where we discuss the notion for the legacy. How can we not only be successful to host a world international events, but also to get use of such huge infrastructure to be of the benefits for the future generation and the country itself. And we ended up our workshop session by having a brainstorming session specified for Aspire itself. We wanted to hear the insights from all participants about what they have seen for the phase 1 and phase 2, and the way forward, again, to create a sort of resilient, multifunctional sports and recreational hub here. And it was quite insightful outcomes, and I'm really grateful. I would like first to thank our local team for giving us the opportunity to organize this workshop. I would like to thank also the ISOCARP Congress for providing such a platform where we can share the knowledge and have everybody on board to discuss such important aspects in our life as urban planners. So thank you very much, and that's all from our end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. And now let me introduce to you someone who preferred to be introduced as the true lover of Doha. Please welcome Professor Ali Abdul Latif.
Yeah, I was asked a very hard question yesterday, how we can introduce you. And I said, skip the CV and skip all the qualifications. I have something that I'm really proud of, and I want to be introduced using that, which is I'm really a true lover of Doha and Qatar. I'm so proud to be here and part of this wonderful country, wonderful city, wonderful people, and also great event. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to start by giving all the credit to a young, talented, creative, committed, and dedicated, lovely architect, female, Qatari, Fatima Al-Badr. Thank you so much, Fatima, for an outstanding design of this workshop, your thoughts about how to present a story for the participants. We were overwhelmed with the participants. We had more than 40 people participating in the workshop. And the main philosophy was we had to believe that Misharab is a story deserves to be shared. And therefore, the philosophy and the conceptual base that Fatima was able to create for us was how to share this story. And hence, the workshop started by a process of contextualization. How to put Misharab in the context of the Gulf. Because the Gulf in general, I'm talking about the Arabian Gulf and Gulf cities, we are aggressively moving from oil-dependent cities to a more knowledge-based and post-carbon urbanity paradigm. So this is very important to be shared. And after that, we talked about Qatar context, because Doha is part of Qatar, and Misharab is part of Doha. So what is exactly happening in Qatar? And again, we talked about different paradigms in the evolution of urbanity in Qatar, and we reached a situation where we were able to provide evidences for our participants that Qatar is moving towards a more people-centered urbanity. And I think this is fundamentally important, that the notion is what I called it, we are moving from the urbanity of the image, which was really controlling the urban development in the Middle East and particularly in the Gulf. We fall in love with the vertical development, with the skyscrapers and huge malls. But what is happening in Qatar now is a turning point, because we are moving more towards places for people. And Misharab is providing that. Another interesting thing that we shared with our participant is Misharab started with what we called it a research journey. The team was able to control the desire and the ego of architects and urban designers to jump into the board and start designing and planning. On the contrary, there were a journey of 3 years of research where a lot of intellectuals, writers, theoreticians, experts, all of them were doing only one thing: how to come up with a comprehensive understanding of Qatar. Qatar as history and heritage, and also Qatar as dreams and aspirations. So how to come up with urban language, urban guidelines, architectural language too. And then the livability question: how to create places that would invite people, that would create sense of belonging, that would change the behavior of people, and therefore suddenly not only expats but Qataris are abandoning their Land Cruisers and jumping into the metro, and from the metro to Musharraf, and they were walking in the different barahas and different sahas and so on and so forth. So this is, to me and to Fatima also, is like kind of an urban revolution happening because of Musharraf. We used a very interesting image in the end of our workshop, where the image was from the top of this hotel looking towards the other side of the bay, which is literally showing the kind of dialogue that Musharraf project initiated, the dialogue between the sustainable people-oriented statement that created by Musharraf versus the skyline of the skyscrapers that are the outcome of the oil paradigm. So as if the project is creating a kind of a very interesting dialogue. And then the final lesson that we were able to come up with also in this workshop is that heritage is not to be copied. Heritage should be understood and used as a platform for creativity and inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Abdulraouf Ali. And now let me introduce to you Jassim Masroor, an urban planning expert and Minister of Municipality, interested in urban strategies to protect the environment. He will give a brief about the workshop held in Qatar for the third track, which about resilience and adaptability. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Jassim Al-Surur, Urban Planning Department, Municipality and Urban Planning, and Ministry of Municipality. I went last time to the group with the team to Qatar, site visit, about to workshop there. When I start to visiting there, it is have some one expert keynote from the Qatar. They sit with us and he discussion about many points about the Qatar, about introduction and what the future vision for the Qatar, and many points about how they controlling about to take care about the places and all the buildings, construction. Then to go for the many sites in the point inside Qatar by Gulf car to go to theater, opera theater, then to go for Falcon community, then to go rounding with many points and the Qatar people, they're talking about the master plan for them. Then workshop settled discussion about to QMB presentation. Then a group discussion to sitting together, and the group presentation, they have some through to talking about the note regarding the residence and adaptability for the track 4, and have many points they have talking about it, and to sitting together to know how it is going on, about what Qatar need for now and for the future, for Ford Cup and for any point, it is, can help for the, regarding our track. Then, in conclusion, then to sit with some point, it is a result about touch for our track for towers of the sustainable urban living in the Qatar. They take the lead in the climate resilience in the Gulf states, sustainable and urban cooling, and become less in the car-oriented city, invest in the local economy and community, and increase public participation in the planning, transformation towards environmentally friendly industrial. Then after finish the Qatar site, it is have many points and many things. It is thinking about the future for the how to going on with our track for the resilience and adaptability. And alhamdulillah, it is very good tour, and I think it is very like something touch for our track for some point, and it is going on. And finally, it is conclusion. I hope all people, it is happiness with us when they go with us for the visited the Qatar site visit and the workshop there, and have many points already with our side. It is now happiness to listening for many expert people from the global with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jassim. And now let me give you a summary about the fifth track. It was about Qatar Rail Doha Metro. We kicked off the workshop with two presentations that introduced the transit-oriented developments happening in Doha through the urban center plans and the urban design compendium, the Better Link, Qatar cities together. We then began with the second presentation, which considered developing new criteria to assess and evaluate transit-oriented developments. During the site visit, our group visited both Asad and Bin Mahmoud station. We explored the relationship between the station itself and the surrounding urban context, evaluating the different exits and the large open spaces that need to be activated to solve the last mile issue in two different neighborhood contexts. We considered many options in our design charity process, where participants drew and placed notes on satellite images, evaluated existing land uses with GIS technology, and creative solutions were chosen: food trucks to activate streetscapes, linear parks to connect the street together, and subdivide large block, as well as traffic calming strategies, such as enhanced pedestrian crossing. Our group has explored the various options for low-cost and fast urban interventions to increase the walkability of Doha, especially around its metro stations. And now we will have the Place Leader Roundtable. The Place Leader Roundtable from cities and metropolises in the Gulf region and beyond, including Brussels Capital Region as a host of the 2022 Congress and moderated by Guy Perry. Please welcome Guy Perry, an ISOCARP member, architect, designer, and a developer who conceives and realizes leading environments that foster sustainability and well-being. Please welcome Guy Perry. The floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back in Doha. I actually have known the region since 1988, and I can confirm that there is no part of the world, that is Qatar and the region that surrounds it, that has evolved as much as this region over that time period. What is especially impressive is what we've just heard. We've heard that there's a transition now that's going on that I think is an earnest transition from an oil-based economy to a knowledge-based economy, and the cities are evolving to reflect that. In my opinion, knowing very well the cities of the region, I see Doha, and actually this project in which we are sitting today, is actually perhaps the leading edge of this evolution. One of the things that I think is absolutely fundamental, and I think it was just raised a moment ago, that there's a relationship between this area, Mashareb, and the towers that we see across the bay, that is a very symbolic transition. And that is the kind of transition that needs to occur not just here, but in cities throughout the region in order to achieve the sustainability and human-centric objectives that I think everyone wishes to address today. So I can't imagine a better place for us to be discussing these issues than where we are right now, because this is the heart of that change, and it demonstrates that it can be done. I work with McKinsey now, so I have a global role with McKinsey. I am based in the region, so I do know the region quite well. But I can say that many cities around the region are trying to achieve what you're achieving here. And I would say that you've already achieved here. What you've done around us today is a microcosm of what needs to be done, I believe, at a larger urban scale. I was very interested also in hearing about the outcomes of the Aspire exercise, about perhaps the reurbanization or the densification and the mixity of uses. I did an article a few years ago called City as Gym, and I was thinking about that, where really if we design our cities in the right way, we actually create environments that help keep us healthy. So the notion that you need to actually have gyms almost disappears. Think of your own experiences when you're visiting a city and you walk 10,000, maybe even 20,000 steps a day without noticing it. I can imagine areas like the one in which we're sitting now. If it continues to extend, it is again that kind of city. The cities that we go to visit, but they end up being cities that are actually very good for you. Those are the cities where you have the lowest diabetes rates, you have the lowest NCD rates in general, and this, of course, is one of the biggest challenges that we have today. So I very much also appreciated the discussion about well-being, because well-being, of course, at the end of the day, the cities should be for us. They should be not just, as was mentioned before, about economics and about quote-unquote progress, but they have to be about the well-being of human beings. And with my role at McKinsey, as a global role for urban planning, design, and cities, I focus really all of our clients. They usually come to us to talk about economics, and I ask them about the real economics, because there are enormous health consequences, for example, when we don't design our cities for people. And I think the path that you are now taking here in Qatar, and specifically in Doha, and specifically in this neighborhood in which we are sitting, is absolutely the right path. Can you continue to improve? Of course you can. But I can say that there are many other cities that wish they had taken this step that you've already made, and that you can continue to lead the way. So I think now we will have a group that we will be able to discuss some of the issues that are most dear to us. I think this is a very open forum today, and I'm grateful to be able to join you here and to be back as part of ISOCARP. With McKinsey, there are a number of restrictions, what I can and can't do, but I'm very, very happy to be here today. The last time I had a full engagement with ISOCARP was actually as the General Rapporteur in Durban, which was a fantastic event, and I'm really glad to be here with you today, and I hope to hear more insights and to coax out of each of our participants many more insights for all of us. Thank you very much. have a seat. Okay, perhaps I'll just ask each panelist to very, very quickly introduce themselves, because I think they're already known, but just so that we know, and also for those who have just joined us. Please.
Does it work?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Good morning, everybody. I'm Anton de Bouwman. I'm the CEO of Perspective Brussels, which is the planning agency and expertise center of Brussels and the Brussels region.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum jami'. I will speak in Arabic just in the opening. أنتهز هذه الفرصة في البداية أن أشكر القائمين على العمل في هذا المؤتمر، وأتمنى أن الأخوان اللي جاءوا في هذا المؤتمر أنهم يكتسبون بعض الخبرات اللي موجودة عندنا في قطر، وهذه فرصة بالنسبة لي أنا أن أشارك في هذا المؤتمر. عموما, my name is Engineer Ali Al-Abdallah. I was the President of Urban Planning Development from 2005 until 2014. And I've been in the ministry for almost 25 years, so I'm not a stranger, to the ministry. We started the urban planning development during the period of my present, with most of what you see now. These are the team that they have worked with us, which is I appreciate, for the good job that they have done until today. So this is just briefly, for who I am. Hopefully we can go into the discussion later on. Thank you.
My name is Ali Al-Raouf. I'm a professor of architecture and urbanism, and I'm really proud to be part of the urban planning family here in Qatar.
Fantastic. One of the things that we'd like to take on during this session is how do we actually implement some of these ideas or continue to sustain these ideas? Because here, for example, Mashreb, we have a fantastic example of urbanism, absolutely in the right direction for the region. How do we extend this at a larger scale? How do we actually go about that? What are the mechanisms that are key to achieve a vision and expand that vision so that it really does start to shape the lives of people? So it's not just a small part of the city, but that it actually begins to extend beyond its current boundaries.
I think, from my experience, honestly, Qatar, we are already exceeded that period of time. For some reason, when we started our master planning, we did involve, all the sectors in Qatar. So we used to have around 68 sectors, different ministries, so they were all involved at the same time, which is the biggest challenge for us at the time, which is to identify the vision for this master planning, which is it took us quite some time in order to collect all this information and collect this vision. And we have started from the higher pyramid, from the higher authority. And this is the key, exactly, where we have started, because to have a sustainable master plan and a sustainable movement, to continue in your urban development, you have to have a proper vision in the beginning, and this is exactly what we have done. So we did set with the higher authority from His Highness the Emir, the father at the time. I remember we had the first session where we have started, the day, let's say, the day of our master planning project, where he allowed us, to give us some time, which is we spent 4 hours with him, with His Highness the Emir, the current Emir, with Her Highness Sheikh Moza, and a couple of key ministers, where they draw the line, and the full strategic. So we had a few questions that we have raised. We collect, all this information, some of it, not all of it, but then we receive the rest. And then from there we have started. So we start developing, all the master plan project. And during that period, we did have a lot of analyzing, the data, etc. So this is a huge challenge. But you have to be very clear because, for us as a technical team, it's very difficult, to identify where we are going. I mean, are we planning, to be a city of tourism? Are we planning to be a city of sport? Are we planning to be the culture of the city itself? So when we got these keys, this is really started. I can tell that this is the main thing, for you to really plan. So going back to your questions, now how are we going to sustain, the plan? Of course, when you have a vision and you have a plan, for us, we completed in 2010. So from there it started, that you need to maintain it because, a lot of changes that sometimes occur, in your plan. I'll give you an example. The World Cup. The World Cup, we knew about it from the beginning, honestly, which is before, we've been awarded in 2010. So we did work with the team that was working, in the file of 2022. And so what you see, we concentrated, in the connectivity of where the events will be, So transportation and infrastructure was our priority. Land use was the second priority. So based on to that, when we got the file and Qatar, want to host, the 2022, it was very easy for us to start with implementation. So it wasn't something difficult for us. So if if you have been, to the stadiums where the event is going to be, you will see the proper connectivity, between these locations and where are the hubs, that going to be for the people, to be for the events and everything. So this is just an example, and take that, with the rest of the growing city, which is one of the example, the location that we are in. This is, of course, there is a different office that taking care, of this project, but we did work together in order to fit this as part of our master plan, that we have. So this is briefly, because if I'm going to talk about this, it will take, a full session.
Each of these could go on for, each of these subjects could be spoken about for days. The system of governance here, if the leadership is on board, allows you to really accomplish things in a very direct and efficient way. In other parts of the world, for example, in Belgium, you may have a very different leadership structure. How do you go about sustaining good ideas so that they can actually be developed, completed, and really yield the results that you're hoping for?
Well, the emphasis that you put on governments is actually the good one, I think, because this is really the main subject for us. And I'm not going to lie, this is not an easy process. It's always a struggling path. Because you have to be sure that actually the path that you're taking is going to be maintained throughout time. And the question is, how do you do that? And I think that to answer to that question, you have to start from the global governance. I mean, we are here in Qatar with ISOCARP speaking, but there are also other forums in the same time which are actually discussing the same issues. Of course, the climate conference in Glasgow, but also, I mean, the European Metropolitan Forum, for example, in Porto, or in Guangzhou, or in other cities. We all talk about the same challenges, which is actually how do we use urbanism to tackle key issues. And key issues is, of course, I mean, the fact that today, 50% of the world population lives in urban areas. Tomorrow, in 2100, we're going to be 85% of the world population in urban areas. While, I mean, cities represent more than 70% of energy consumption, for example. So we see that those energy and climate issues are really do play a central role in governance. And so we need to be sure that our strategies answer to those global issues. So we need to start from the global governance. Now, what did we did in Brussels to take this? Is that we translated those global issues into strategic documents which apply on the local level to identify which are the different actions that can actually answer to all of those global issues. And of course, I mean, we have to associate a sense of urgency to answer to those issues with also structural answers. So you need, of course, to answer quickly and to take the measure of the challenge which is facing us. So this needs urgent answers, but it also needs to be answered through time. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have some urgent answers today and not to maintain them towards a more global issues in the long term. And this association of quick answers and quick mobilization and also structural answers is really the role for strategic planners and strategic urbanism, I do believe. This governance at local level, they actually need to identify all the different actions that can actually answer positively to those challenges, such as reduce land consumption, for example, measurize mobility and use active forms of mobility, for example, use the development of public transportation. Energy production, of course, as well. I mean, cities also do have to play a role in energy production and not to rely only on centralized suburban energy production. And of course, the energy efficiency of buildings. All those different challenges need to be tackled through a strategic vision. On the local level, it means you have to have a strategic vision. That's really the first point. And second, I think as urban planners, we also need to stay humble. I mean, we will never have all the answers by ourselves. It only makes sense if we do act collectively. I mean, if we collaborate with all the different actors who play a role in the city, which is, of course, the institutional layer, which is, of course, our governance, but it's also all the different actors who play a role in the city, which is all the different public actors, for example, the public transportation system, the mobility agencies, the environmental agencies. I mean, we alone cannot do, we are powerless. We need to tackle those. And we, of course, need to collaborate also with civil society. And this sound and transparent and collaborative relations with civil society will also determine whether you are able to tackle those issues in times of crisis. If the dialogue is not really good, if the relations are not very good, then you will have difficulties during times of stress because crisis creates insecurity. And insecurity creates also blockage and difficulties of tackling those issues. So you need to have this sound collaboration with all the different actors. And then, which means transversality. I mean, we as urban planners have the ability to gather all the different themes and elements and dimensions which play a role in the city. So it is therefore most important to have this transversal vision. And then transversal vision also means that our first action and our first tool is actually data. I mean, we are data professionals. Mm-hmm. Without data, it's really very most difficult to have any kind of governance. You need to anticipate all the data that you're going to need to foster some city evolution and urbanism. So, which also means that you have to anticipate the collection of data before, so that you can also evaluate the impacts of your actions afterwards. Which, I mean, it's the same theme as I was playing before. We have to stay humble, which means also you have to accept that you do trial and errors, that you do some tests sometimes to also evaluate the impacts of your actions. And then you also need to be agile, which is really an enormous challenge for urban planners, because we have to associate some structural visions and regulations also of the land with some agility. But I think that we have to associate those two dimensions, regulation on the one hand and agility on the other. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to promote innovation, to promote new solutions to all the challenges that we're facing and that you mentioned as well in your introduction speech, which is, of course, climate change, which is also the health issues, which are really important and that actually are going to also be the center of our next year Congress in Brussels. So this means that with agility, knowledge management, transversality, then you can have some kind of sound governance at local level, which also needs to include what happens in the urban centers, but also what happens in the suburban areas, which means that governments needs to associate the local level with also a metropolitan vision. Because of course, if you only tackle issues at the urban centers, then you're going to be blind on what happens at the outskirts of the city. And this is, of course, especially important in the context of a post-pandemic crisis. Why? Because as we have seen with the promotion of teleworking, for example, especially in our urban areas, there is a stronger incentive actually for urban sprawl and suburbanization, right. Which means that you have to have this global governance at metropolitan areas to avoid that in times of crisis, it means more attraction to go on the outskirts of the city. And this means that you have to create urban centers which are actually centered on the well-being of the individuals at the individual level. Which means also you have to have an innovative approach also, I think, of density. Density, I think, is a major concept for urbanism in the years to come. But you have to approach density with the density of the functions, actually, that compose a city, which means these polycentric, multifunctional urban centers, which do approach all the different dimensions of the everyday life. And with all the different equipments that are necessary for a city to function and for all its households, which is of course important to avoid urban sprawl, which is also crucial for social cohesion. And I think that we're not going to succeed to tackle all of those challenges that I talked about, and especially climate change and health problems that, as you mentioned, is really going up in these periods of times. If we do not include this social inclusion and social cohesion dimension. And this means that you really have to foster also all the different actions that you can use to be sure that social inclusion is guaranteed. Now, as a conclusion of this, I just want to say that we have, as you mentioned actually also in your introductory speech, we have to evaluate the costs of the no action, no action means that you're not going to be able to tackle health problems, which means that your health expenses are going to rise. So this means if you want to be a contra on the other side of this, you need to promote active mobility, for example. You have to promote active sports in the city. You have to promote healthy consumption, healthy food. All those different dimensions are crucial. And then the cost of non-action on the climate level is also, of course, huge. And we need, of course, to do this on two separate levels. The first level is, as I mentioned, to use all the different actions that can foster, to diminish climate change. On the other hand, you also have to anticipate extreme weather variations of extreme weather conditions. We experienced floods, for example, in Belgium this year, extreme floods, which means that those kind of phenomena are going to just accelerate in the future. So in the urban areas, we have to also to anticipate those kind of phenomena. Otherwise, we're going to also have some very negative consequences on social cohesion and inequalities. So as just a conclusion, a first conclusion, I think we really have to evaluate the cost of non-action to also justify, as urban planners, the necessity of investments which are necessary to tackle all of those issues.
Extraordinarily important points. It's clear that when we're in Brussels, we'll have a full agenda. So, Professor Ali, you have a background that is of the region. You're both hands-on here, but also in your home country, Egypt. Can you talk about the differences, the advantages of the process in Qatar vis-a-vis Egypt and vice versa? What can each of these countries learn from each other?
Well, you know what, this is a bit critical question because although I am originally from Egypt, but I'm a bit far from the country for a good number of years, so it would be kind of hard for me to create a more credible comparison. But let me start with the reflection on the question that you started the discussion with, and then I would also elaborate on the comparative analysis. And I want to start with the idea of enlightened leadership. I mean, in every country we love our leaders and they inspire us. But I think in Qatar, and I'm not flattering here Sheikh Hamad Rabbi Tawal Umar or Sheikh Tamim or Sheikh Moza, but I want to share something with you and with our participants related to how the leader can create a new paradigm. Because to me, as an architect, urban designer, planner, city maker, Doha lover, and so on and so forth, you are looking for a leader that would encourage you to create a new paradigm. I remember that I attended a speech by Sheikha Moza where she said, in Qatar, it's time to move from consuming knowledge to producing knowledge. And I think this is fundamental. This is crucial in the heart of Qatar to say that stop consuming and let's move to producing knowledge. And then the question is how to produce knowledge, how to create the right infrastructure in the city that would inspire people to produce knowledge. And therefore, I'm so grateful to you, Engineer Ali, for all what you have done in terms of creating the blueprint for the city regarding, number one, how to convince Qataris and expats to abandon their cars. You cannot do that without excellent transit-oriented development, where you have a wonderful network of public transportation. You have metro with 4 lines covering all the metropolitan Doha with educational facilities, recreational facilities, shopping facilities, and so on and so forth. And then you deconstruct the structure of the city from a very centralized to a different urban centers, as you rightly said. And each of those centers are packed with community facilities, green spaces. We heard wonderful presentations from Dr. Hiba and her colleagues and Dr. Muna and her colleagues regarding the well-being and open spaces and so on and so forth. Another interesting point, in my opinion, which is related to Mashera project per se, is that when it comes to sustainability and sustainable development and people-oriented places and public places and so on and so forth, I think we need to move from theoretical intervention, although I am coming from the academia, but I think there's a huge difference between talking about sustainability, talking about places for people, and experiencing places for people. And this is why I think Mashera project is crucial. It's a turning point, because for the first time in the history of a contemporary Gulf city, you would tell people that walk, and then they will go and walk and will enjoy walking. You will tell them, go and enjoy public spaces, and they will go and they will find a beautiful public space with the shaded trees, with a wonderful water fountain. So suddenly you create an interesting sense of belonging. Once you do that, it's very easy to say, let's repeat the model. Let's use this model as if you throw a stone in an ocean, and then all these ripples of development are really creating dynamism. The very final point that I want to share with you, if you allow me, is related to a very interesting session that we had yesterday with our brothers and colleagues from other Gulf cities, particularly from Saudi Arabia, from Emirates, from Kuwait. And I was really impressed that what we are doing in Qatar is not that radically different from what our colleagues and brothers are doing in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Emirates. All of them are changing the perception about Gulf cities. We are not into, excuse me, my brothers in Dubai, we are not into Dubaification of cities anymore. I used to use this term in some of my research and books and whatever. I think we are moving to a different paradigm where the idea of looking at the image of Gulf City as a group of skyscrapers surrounded by huge shopping malls is not the image anymore. Every single city in the Gulf, and we saw wonderful examples yesterday from Kuwait and from UAE and from Saudi Arabia and from Qatar by my brother Abdullah Al-Karani, the director of the urban planning. All of these cases are suggesting that we are moving towards people-friendly places. And as I said, you cannot convince people to adopt these models, to participate in these models without creating an actual experiences. And this is the significance of Mashera. Thank you so much.
I think that's absolutely right, and thank you for highlighting that. Because what I have seen is that the entire region indeed is trying to move in that direction. But the challenge is, can we actually get people to adopt this new way of life? So it's not just an isolated, wonderful example, the one that we're sitting in today. How do we go about this? Because we have had decades now of a suburbanization which was engineered. It wasn't human-centric. It was focused, it had other priorities, which probably made sense at the time. But we have what we have. I'm half American, so I can say that you've inherited some of our problems of urbanism. So how do we overcome that? How do we make this transition?
Right.
Because I know that there are enormous malls still being planned for Riyadh. I know that, that many of the developers in the Emirates are still interested in doing developments that are not people-centric. I know that some are. And I know that, for example, one of my favorite examples in the Emirates is the sustainable city. Fascinating example of how you readapt a courtyard. How do you create something that truly is sustainable, that really does have a lower carbon footprint in this climate, and has a very different sense of community than what is typically built in the region or has been built over the last few decades. So how do we, in a sense, take these points of brilliance and extend them beyond their current borders so that they're truly impactful. How do we do that in terms of governance? Can we guide people to this way of life? Can we be a little bit more rigorous about the direction? Because you have very enlightened leadership here. This is one of the reasons you've been able to achieve so much over the last decades. And they've bought into this. Can there be a firmer hand about how to actually implement this at a larger scale? I know this is a difficult question, but I think this is at the crux of the matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a democracy, you have your own challenges of people all wanting to go their own way. But still, how can we go about, in addition to these examples that are few but powerful, how do we accelerate this process? Because I'm afraid we cannot wait 50 years for this to happen. We need to make it happen in the next 10, 20 years to save our planet, or at least our climate, so that it's hospitable for us. And also, I think, to save our well-being. Because again, our health statistics are still going in the wrong direction, in spite of the progress that science has made. Our life patterns are so out of kilter with us as a natural habitat. We're so far away from that today. How do we rectify the situation? How do we accelerate that process? I know this is a tough question. Engineer Ali.
Well, I think this is a very critical question, but we do have very good example. And it's a combination of everything: leadership, wellness, and awareness. So when we started the master planning, we work in parallel with the transportation master plan. So at the time, His Highness the Emir, the father, he gave us a direction to take in consideration for public transportation. One of it is the bicycle lane, in order to do the connectivity between all the cities. A lot of people, when they heard about it, they say, who will take a bicycle, and start going through around the city where the heat, in here is so high. So we took that as a challenge. This is only a small example, At the time, maybe you barely can see a bicycle, around any town, in Doha. So when we did all the master plan of all the roads, so we created, all the paths that take, for bicycles, that connect you between city to city. We have the longest bicycle lane, which is going from Doha all the way to Al Khor. I think it's about 33 kilometers.
Yes.
And then it's going around all the city of Doha today. So starting the season, which is the weather nowadays, it's really nice. And you will see a lot of people, coming outside with their bicycles, with their, walking around and everything. So it's a sort of, a leader wish, and it happened. But the most important thing is the awareness and the education. We put that one also, as part of our curriculum, for the young generation at school. Because I used to be also in the community, the committee of safety at the time. And one of the reasons, one of the issues that we tackled, how we can raise, this awareness, and how we can raise this issue, to the biggest, part of the community. So we said, let's start, from an early age. And this is one thing, to keep the early age, growing with these ideas, and then it will be as part of them, and this is what we achieved. So if we compare now of what we have done, it's good that we have completed our study. Let's say the blueprint, of what direction that we are going is in 2010. So we start in parallel implementing that. until today. So we do have a success and a lot of good things, and we do have a few things that needs to be tuned a little bit. Because, you know, depends of your economy, depends from your growth, because at the end of the day, when you plan based on statistics, based on information. This information, it could vary and change with time, you know, but you always have the flexibility where you can really move ahead, you know, without stopping your plan, but you could delay certain things in order to fit with your needs and requirements at the time that you are in. So this is something that I think the awareness is very, very important. But at the end of the day, it will take a leadership in how you will implement this, you know. Yes. And the support that we have received, I think it's very unique. We are so close to the government. They are involved with us, you know, at the time, and this is where we get all the support in order to achieve what you have seen today, you know. So this is just in a very simple way, you know, from what we have done in here.
I think the point of creating good habits for young people is absolutely critical, because that if we don't establish that, it's very hard for them to carry those habits later into life. And indeed, that I think is going to be one of the key sources of transition that will eventually bring the cities back together, hopefully, if they choose to live that way. Until COVID, we had a significant re-urbanization in the United States. For example, the city of Chicago, for the first time in decades, in generations even, there were more new homes being built within the city of Chicago than in the suburbs. But now, post-COVID, of course, that's completely changed again. So it will be a challenge, especially for those young that have grown up during this period, where they'll remember how difficult it was. But I think we have to stay the course. And actually, if we create exterior-oriented places, these places, by and large, are healthier environments. Because I'm afraid we may get over this COVID, but we may have another. And in any case, we're going to want to engage the public exterior space, I think, more actively in the future. There are climatic challenges here. Belgium has other climatic challenges, but not perhaps as severe, because it tends to be a moderate climate year-round. Not extremely hot, not extremely cold, but a bit of rain. What are some of your thoughts? How can we accelerate the process of creating truly sustainable and human-centric cities?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the most important part of the process, I believe, is to have a governance system that identifies clearly the goals that you want to pursue. And then the question is, how can you use the crisis events to accelerate actually the evolution towards those goals? And the pandemic, of course, created a special moment in that respect, with a paradox that you also mentioned, mentioning Chicago. The paradox that with teleworking, the commuting process, of course, is less attractive. And a lot of people actually want to live further from the urban centers. At the same time, you have seen that a lot of people changed their behaviors during the crisis and during the lockdown, meaning that a lot of people used more active mobility systems. They walked more, they used more the bikes. And in the same time, especially, well, in Brussels, but also in other European cities, such as Paris, such as other places, we also seen that the lockdown was used to foster infrastructure's evolutions. And a lot of bike lanes, for example, were created during that time. And now the challenge is, of course, to resolve this paradox and to be sure that the infrastructures continue to be developed and continue to be used, of course. Because if everybody lives far from the urban centers, then of course there is less people who's going to use those bike lanes and less people who are going to walk in the city. while I believe, and actually I'm very much inspired also by Jan Gale, for example, of other urbans, that the walkability of a city is a very good indicator of how healthy a city is. Absolutely. Meaning that if children, for example, walk in the city and use its public spaces, if a lot of people walk, including also more elder people, it means that the public spaces are healthy and sound and do answer also to the livability of your city. So I do believe that these are most important. Now, of course, a second dimension, and to answer to your question, is the economical factor. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to a world where a lot of more people are going to live in the urban centers, which means that the land is going to be more and more expensive. And so this creates an increasing challenge for cities to be able to have the tools and actions necessary to tackle those issues and to be able to foster the evolution towards those goals. And I think it's really interesting also to have this kind of international congresses and international events, also to be able to exchange on those elements. Why? Because, I mean, it's always very nice to draw nice things on a map and to make nice drawings, but of course, the essential element is how you could translate those drawings into real equipments and the reality. And this needs to tackle, of course, the economic reality and the investments I was also talking before. And I think that also on that aspect, you need to come with innovative solutions. Regarding taxation, for example, regarding the collection of spillovers effect of your investments. Because if you do indeed foster urban adaptations and foster walkability, for example, it also means that the surroundings and the value of your properties are going to go higher. But if all of those higher values is captured by private investors, then it's of course more and more difficult for the public authorities to be able to do those investments and to have the capacities to do them. So I think that we have to exchange more also on those kind of aspects to identify also maybe with our international organizations, how can we tackle this issue, which is more and more crucial in the future.
Professor Ali, there's a theme that's I say it's reappeared because it's nothing new. It's kind of reappeared today. It's the notion of the 15-minute city, right? It's just common sense, really. And we had 15-minute cities until a few decades ago, right? So I guess how do we? Because I think this is one of the keys to achieving this sustainability and this wellness. The city of Paris is kind of, the mayor has made it a mission, but they're lucky because they already have a 15-minute city, so it's pretty easy for them to do it. Cairo used to be a 15-minute city too, but the way it's expanding, I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. What are some of your thoughts about how proper governance can help us achieve more 15-minute cities? And your knowledge, of course, of Doha and Qatar, how would you recommend that they pursue that strategy more actively? I know this is also very much on the agenda now in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I know it's in the agenda of the UAE. So these are things that are being discussed regionally. But with your experience and insights in the region, what recommendations would you have for Qatar and for other cities in the region?
Thank you. I had a very interesting discussion with the team that sort of invented the concept, and particularly in Spain and in Paris, and how the mayor in Paris is so excited about the concept. But what is really interesting is that in Mashera workshop, we were able to sort of label the concept of the 15 cities using our own terminology from this part of the world. Because the 15-minute city is basically about compacted urbanism.
Yes.
It's about the concept of what we called it here Farij in Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Qatar, which is basically a part of the city rather than a city, because I'm really reluctant to say that we will have 15-minute cities, but I would go more for more districts with, as Engineer Ali did with his team in the Blueprint for Qatar, and now it's continued with my brother Abdul Al-Karani, the idea of hierarchy of urban centers, and all of these centers are served with mixed-use development, excellent public transportations, sports facilities, community facilities, and so on and so forth. And then the idea also is when, as I said, when you encourage people to walk and go to schools and go to places to have fun with their families and so on and so forth, even going to pray, the journey from their houses to a mosque, how to think about all of these journeys to be an interesting and beautiful journeys. Now, this would lead me also to another interesting part of your question regarding awareness and regarding how to sort of use those projects to change the behavior of people. And I will share with you a couple of very interesting stories. One is related to Musharraf, because I used to come a lot to Musharraf to do photography and do sketches and whatever. And one time I grabbed a coffee and I was sitting in Baraha, and just beside me there was this wonderful Qatari man. He kept on looking at me saying, what this crazy guy is doing, because I was taking pictures and drawing. And then I told him, I am a professor in architecture and urbanism. I work in the urban planning department and I love the place. And then he told me something beautiful. I will say it in Arabic and then I will translate it in English. راجل عود قطري ما شاء الله عليه فقال لي أنت عارف أنا بحب المشروع ده ليه؟ لأنه لأول مرة أشعر إن بدل ما نتعلم من الأجانب إحنا نعلم الأجانب. الناس الأجانب بيجوا يطلعوه يتعلموا منه. He told me that I love this project because for the very first time I felt that Westerns, instead of we trying to imitate them all the time, they are coming here to look at this project and learn from it. And I think this is the essence of awareness. Yes. The essence of awareness is how to make local people proud about their built environment, proud about their built environment not as history, not as old chapters, but as a continuation. The second interesting story, I've heard it from one of the top local architects here in Qatar. And he was telling me Musharraf also did a paradigm shift in terms of the taste of people, the preferences of people. So suddenly, people are coming to his office for the design of their houses. They don't have pictures from Florida. They don't have pictures from California. They are telling him literally, we want you to do something similar to Musharraf. We want courtyard houses. We want gardens. We want to go back to the concept of Farij. We want to move on a walkability environment most of the time. Hence, I'm saying that it seems to me that the typical awareness campaign where you do it in the media and so on and so forth, I think it's becoming obsolete. A much better way to create awareness is what I would call it indirect awareness, where people would feel that we are engaged in a different positive experience and therefore we will believe in it and we would do it.
So this truly is a watershed district that we're sitting in today. And I think that indeed, if we can change people's sensibility, actually bring it back to what it was. I always believe that our ancestors are, in many ways, we're very smart, but they were very wise. And today we need more and more wisdom, I think, to actually bring an appropriate set of responses to the challenges we face. I think one of the things that I find very interesting is how do we reestablish the walkability in a climate like this? Okay, the Gulf has the challenge. Now, Riyadh is a little different. It's a hotter but drier climate and cooler in the winter. The Red Sea has some of the same challenges. But if you're walking in Al Balad, it's actually a lot cooler in Jeddah than in the newer parts of Jeddah. And the same is if you're in the older parts of Fez, the Medina of Fez. I did the master plan extension of Fez. You have a 6 degrees Celsius difference between the Medina of Fez and the area surrounding it. What I saw as I had the chance to visit pre-COVID this area before it was completely open and complete. And I started to feel what I felt in Fez. I felt that kind of granularity. I felt the shading. I felt the buildings helping each other. That it was really a community of structures as opposed to a series of individual. And already you're setting the right tone for creating a place that is collectively trying to make a better environment for people and indirectly for the planet. How do we accelerate this? I'm sorry to keep pushing on this because I'm afraid we don't have 50 years for this evolution to occur. And we have a lot of legal frameworks, land ownership frameworks, et cetera, that are cast in stone, quite literally. How do we accelerate this evolution? Do we redevelop parts of suburbanized areas? Because we all know that at 2,000 people per square kilometer, we cannot create a sustainable environment that's walkable or even bikeable in this climate. How do we accelerate? And obviously, we don't want everything at 10,000 people per square kilometer either. We want a variety of experiences. But how do we make that transformation? Is it along major arteries? And how does government play a role in terms of dictating where you can build, where you can do mixed use, where you can densify? Do we need to rethink? And I'll just add one more thing. My father, many, many years ago, he was one of the leaders of creating the MARTA system in Atlanta, the metro system. And at the time, he kind of lamented, he said, you know, we're making a system for a city that doesn't want to live with a metro. Okay? Everyone has their car, everyone has their suburban house, they all go to the mall, and the metro system is actually antithetical to this. However, a few years ago, Atlanta recreated the master plan for the city, recreated the zoning plan for the city, entirely based on that MARTA metro system. Now, today, could Atlanta afford to make that system? Probably not. So they did it when they could afford it, even though it didn't make sense. Can we learn something from that? Can we rethink the planning of the cities in the region? Because Riyadh is about to open its own metro system. But the current urbanization of the city is not in phase, with the exception of a few places, with that metro system. But there's enormous opportunity, I believe, in reshaping the cities around that metro framework. Can we be firm about that? Can we actually really push the city that way in creating a city that is more integrated, more dense, more sustainable around the framework of the metro, the wonderful metro you've just completed, or the one that's just being completed now in Riyadh. And of course, Dubai has its own metro that's expanding. Again, is this an opportunity, and how firm can we be about developing that? In Europe, there's a heritage of integrating public transportation.
Okay. Did you notice that I love stories, right? Okay, let me share one more story with you to answer this question. I came to Qatar 12 years ago. I was hired as a professor at Qatar University. And a couple of nights in a hotel, and then I selected a house. They moved me to the house. I don't have a car. So for a whole week, I have to go from my house to a grocery store to bring coffee or milk or something, which was basically 500 meters, 700 meters from the house to the grocery store. Every single day in this week, in my walking trip to the grocery store, a wonderful Qatari man, or maybe two, they will stop and ask me, how can we help you? Why they were asking me this? I kept on questioning this. And then I did realize that nobody was comprehending the idea that someone is walking. Why you're walking? I remember a couple of them asked me, where is your broken car? How can we help you? All of them are wonderful people with wonderful heart. Yes. But the idea of people walking in the city was not there. And that was only 12 years ago. Now you go to a lot of places in Qatar now and people are walking. Why? Why this is happening? Because I think we are, I don't want to draw a rosy picture, but I'm saying that it's a process. And the most important thing about this process is how to transform the perception of our network from highways to streets. Because when you move from the concept of a highway, you are actually putting the car on the least priority. When you go to the concept of street, you're talking about shaded places, you're talking about social places, you're talking about white sidewalks, you're talking about Jane Jacobs saying that the street is the stage of life. People are interacting, eating, drinking, celebrating, and so on and so forth. So I think what we are trying to do now in Doha and the rest of the Gulf cities is, in my opinion, and I'm sure Engineer Ali would elaborate, the idea of transition from highways to streets for people.
So this means addressing the road department. Just an anecdote. In 1924, General Motors did a deal with the US government where streets were no longer shared streets, but they prioritized the automobile. And people were then relegated to sidewalks and pedestrian crossings, et cetera. But in 1924, so we're going to come up on its 100th anniversary soon, and maybe in 2024 we'll rethink that, that watershed moment that occurred in the United States and impacted the world. So in any case, other thoughts about how do we accelerate this process about using public transportation? Now, Europe is quite far down that, has never left that path, let's put it that way, entirely. It's gotten away from it, but I would still say that European cities, people, public transportation, walkability has always been a concern in Europe. It's never completely been lost.
Well, it actually is, but I wouldn't say that we don't face our challenges as well regarding that, because I mean the functional city also made its created consequences, and we also have our business districts where actually all the district is designed for cars and not for people. So I would say that, well, just three thoughts about that. First, I really think the walkability dimension is essential in any city planning and design, which means you have to act on three different dimensions, I believe. First one is you will never convince someone to walk if it's not something which is attractive, easy, secure, and interesting. So it means that you have to design your cities creating an interesting activities and animations. Animations means, for example, shops. Is there anything interesting to see? It means fostering and measuring also your patrimonium. Do you see interesting things? In Brussels, for example, we have this approach by creating green links in the cities through pathways, pathways designed for people, which doesn't mean necessarily creating new parks. It just needs to create a link which is green with a green environment, not necessarily big, but at least that creates the incentive to use walking walkways. Second element is, of course, the combinations of walk and public transportations. And we still are in a big challenge to foster this public transportation. You will never create more attractiveness and more incentives to walk if you do not have public transportations also. These articulate and combine themselves. And third, you have to create security for the people. The security means, for example, that you have to be very attentive at the intersections of roads, where, I mean, it's useless to have a pathway that stops when there is a cross of lanes or cross of roads. You have to be sure that it facilitates also crossing those lanes for the people. Or another example is to fostering, such as you have in this area actually, is to have car-free zones. Mm-hmm. Car-free zones are also an interesting tool to promote, for example, walkability and also cyclability in a city. And in Brussels, for example, we developed very important zone for car-free zones, which is actually, after several steps, now a very attractive part of the city, and which very used and also promotes interesting shopping activities, for example. So I think that you also have to see that walkability can also create economic prosperity when it's a sound strategy.
I will have to wrap up the session, but I will mention one thing that, of course, McKinsey, we're always working with economics. The measure of walk score is actually a measurement that was established by the real estate industry. And what's very interesting is the relationship between walk score. The higher it is, of course, the more walkable a neighborhood, the more it is a 15-minute neighborhood, shall we say. And the value of real estate is a direct one. Now, that is not yet the case in this part of the world as much, but I believe it will be, because I think the intention of the leadership that I have at least met throughout the region is absolutely going this way. And I think we're sitting here today in an excellent example of how we can take that path forward. So thank you, and thank the audience. And I'm sure we're open for questions off the stage as well. So thank you all.
Thank you for your great ideas and the enriching discussion. Thank you all. Before ending, I would like to invite everyone to the closing plenary. It will include various speeches such as the summary of the Congress and the Doha Declaration. And on behalf of the Minister of Municipality, I would like to invite everyone to the Congress Gala Dinner that will take place in Qatar National Museum in the Old Castle from 7 to 9 p.m. The gathering point is in the main hall area, and there will be 3 buses waiting for anyone who doesn't have a transportation. There is a registration for the dinner, so please register, and the dress code is formal. And finally, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. Thank you for coming and listening.